Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today, February 11th, a day that, for at least me and I know many other families around our country, is a very dark day. February 11th, 1965, flying off of the USS Coral Sea, a young lieutenant commander, Robert Harper Shoemaker, was prepared to do a bombing run over North Vietnam. Taking anti-aircraft fire, was shot down over North Vietnam, ejected from his F-8 Crusader 35 feet above the ground, broke his back upon impact, and was immediately captured. Over the next 8 years and a day, he spent time in the Hoa Lo prison, a prison that we now know is the Hanoi Hilton, one that he was able to name the Hanoi Hilton. He was considered to be the great communicator, because while he was in captivity, he and a few others devised a tap code system with 5 rows and 5 columns that enabled American POWs to communicate with one another, to be able to let them know that they were thinking of each other, to be able to make sure that they were exercising the most important muscle in captivity, and that's their brains. Over the course of those 8 years, Lieutenant Commander Shoemaker was considered to be one of the top greatest threats to camp security. He and 10 other POWs, commonly known as the Alcatraz 11, were taken out of the Hoa Lo prison, brought over to a prison now known as Alcatraz, and put in solitary confinement. These 11 heroes, including James Stockdale, George Coker, Jeremiah Denton, who was a senator from the great state of Alabama, Harry Jenkins, George McKnight, James Mulligan, Howard Rutledge, Ron Storts, Nels Tanner, and, Mr. Speaker, our colleague Sam Johnson, who was elected to this body in 1991 and has served with distinction ever since. Many of the stories that we look back on were coming from these heroes and the efforts that they did to resist their captors. They were tortured day in and day out for information, and yet day in and day out they battled back. It's, for me, very important that we never forget. So February 11th, 1965, today, 51 years after, I'm honored to be able to rise in this body to remember Robert Harper Shoemaker for his valiant efforts, his heroism. He's near and dear to my heart, Mr. Speaker. He's my uncle. When my wife and I had our first child, we decided we would name her after him, in hopes that she would have a little bit of the courage, a little bit of the intelligence and the stick-to-itiveness as Admiral Shoemaker does. But what's the good news, Mr. Speaker, is that February 12th, 1973, 591 POWs started their return home. Bob Shoemaker, the Alcatraz 11, and many others were on that first flight, that 141 that flew out of Hanoi. I am proud to say that they returned home with honor, which was absolutely critical not only for them but for all of the POWs. It's imperative that we here in the United States Congress never forget their sacrifice, their heroism. And for me, on February 11th, from now until as long as I'm able to serve in this body, I will rise and recognize the heroism of our POWs and say you will never be forgotten. We will always remember the sacrifice and the heroism that you all have given to our nation. And I want to say again a special thank you to you all.